question I had was mainly just to understand how, you were talking about event-led growth and then community-led growth, and just like kind of go back into the definition of those two terms, understanding what the difference is in terms of like types of events, number of events, and like how you transition from one to the other. And like the evolution that you were talking about is like, how would you basically best advise a company that's kind of starting off in the event space to, develop the strategy that today like works so well for LumApps?
Okay. So when you're starting out in the event space and you're trying to select what events to put on your calendar, there is a clear barrier in terms of budget. Event marketing is a costly investment, but done right, again, great results. So the first thing I would recommend is the first year you actually do a lot of testing yourself. And so we spoke about negotiation for packages at conferences that you can sponsor. And I would start with that, not do your own events initially, but to really understand what are the topics that are driving most engagement. Like go to as many conferences as possible and get free passes, negotiate, with the vendors saying, well, this year, we'd really like to, but you're pricing us out. We have clearly identified you, so can you provide some free passes for us to explore? And we can bring some more clients with us so that you can potentially have future registrants within our customer base, but for us to really explore and understand if you're right for us. Most vendors are looking for long-term relationships, so they're willing to accommodate that. And that'll also help you literally see what people are reacting to. What are the type of contents and even the messages that people appreciate? So that would be the first recommendation. Don't go for like big trade shows aren't necessarily a good value for most startups. It's too expensive and you're not going to get the value out of it. Because people don't know you. And those trade shows are interesting when people are coming towards you. Otherwise, it requires a whole lot of effort to prepare the event and a lot of people on site to grab the right attention. So once you've got a better understanding what your market is interested in and what they expect to see at events, I would recommend also not exactly spying, but really identifying what your competitors are doing. That doesn't mean you should be following your competitors because you don't want to be a follower. But again, that'll give you insight into how people like to interact in your audience. And then like when you're starting to build this community-led growth, you need to partner with people. I mean, unless you've got the most fantastic social media person or outbound person who's able to attract attention, I mean, I would recommend you invest and partner with people. Because if your first breakfasts that you organized are really well organized, that sets a standard for what people can expect of you. Mm-hmm. And it also sets the standards for what your sales team can expect from this type of activity. Because if you organize an after work and there are 5 people, they're not going to want to come or even invest time in the next one. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. The only thing I would love for you to like kind of stress on is what does it actually mean to have an event-led growth event or a community-led growth?
So the real difference, and thank you, I totally forgot that part of the question. The real difference is how do you connect the dots between each event? When you're doing event-led growth, it's more tactical. Like you've got this fantastic event and you've got to optimize before, during, and post. And post-event typically stops once the SDRs have called 7 times, once you've sent emails, and once you've nurtured them. A community-led growth is identifying within these people that you've engaged with at the event, which ones were the most engaged and which ones are worth adding into a smaller community, and that can be a WhatsApp group, that can be an email chain, where you're going to get these people to interact. That's really challenging, but that's where the magic happens. Right. So between these rendezvous that you're doing, that you're creating for them, there is interaction. That's when you're starting to create a community. And you've got to have like dedicated content to them, like free tickets to events. That's always a great one. It really depends on who your audience is, but I spoke to one of, she's a fantastic lady who was advising us when we were starting to put in place this community-led growth strategy. And she was working for Doctolib at the time, and she had organized a ton, like afterworks, thinking, it'll be fun for them to connect, right? Not everybody loves networking, but she realized soon that doctors just don't have time. And so that's a critical thing in their life. They don't have time. So what they were actually really interested in is tools or advice on tools and best practices to optimize their time, optimize their work. And so when she started creating that type of content, she got a lot of engagement and exchanges on the online community that she'd created. So they'd prefer that than physically meeting each other.
Very interesting.
So
Interesting. Okay.
creating the link between the rendezvous.
So we had spoken about also kind of the strategy that you do with, if I'm not mistaken, gifting, with those WhatsApp groups, with the creation of ambassadors, potentially. Can you please describe a bit more what all these things, how you guys do these things, why you do these things, when? It was interesting when we spoke about it last time.
So gifting, like everybody, we are challenged with attendance rate. And it's particularly painful when you're creating your own event. So I spoke about the big conference that we do at Bright. Attendance rate is a key metric for us there. And so a way to ensure a certain level of attendance rate is embarking your registrants into the experience before the event and physically doing that, right? And one of the key things that I learned from universities in the US is making sure that people get part of the experience, like with a gift pack before the event. And so they're able to also share on social media that they're part of this experience and they're excited. You absolutely need some of your customers who are already registered or registrants to share that, what their plan and what their agenda for the day is, not only to help you gain new registrants, but also to reaffirm the fact that they're coming. They actually publicly said they would. So gifting is a clear way that we use. I don't think that having gifts on your booth is a way to really generate business. It's nice to have. It's always nice to leave somebody with a gift, but it's not a differentiator in terms of the experience. But gifting as either thank you for attending post-event, continuing the experience, or as a pre-event. How do you say fidélisation in French? We're having an issue here.
Customer loyalty.
Exactly. Creating loyalty towards your event is a good one.
Okay. Elise, can we go back a little bit on the impact of these events on the business itself? You don't have to go specifics into the numbers of LumApps, but can you just describe a little bit how these events have performed in terms of sales pipeline, in terms of revenue, in terms of these kinds of metrics that you would obviously include when you're calculating and measuring ROI around these events?
So when we go back to stage one opportunity pipeline, so it's the equivalent of SQL in most companies, historically, field events have comprised between 25 and 30% of all pipeline created. When you just look at marketing, so if you're excluding sales-generated pipeline, partner-generated pipeline, and other, if it's just the marketing functions, then it corresponds to about 40%. And in terms of booking revenue, when you look at a multi-touch attribution model, we are able to touch an opportunity that's closing on average 40% of the time. So it doesn't mean that we're sourcing the business, but we are influencing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the touch points, and there's a topic that's always a really hot topic in marketing conversations.
Attribution model.
Exactly. The U model, the first touch point, the last touch point.
Yeah.
When does a closed deal get attributed to the events team, the field marketing team, and so on and so on? And when does it not? How do you measure the weight of this influence, of that event on a deal closed? How do you guys do that internally, basically?
So we're in transformation discussion around that because LumApps is at a stage where we need to be a bit more not proactive, but mindful on how we're mapping our attribution. We're quite advanced compared to a lot of companies, but we want to take that next step. So currently we're at a first touch attribution model. So it's where did the lead come in historically? That's going to be assigned as the source of the business. That's not necessarily the metric that I look at. I look at last touch, which is what is the last marketing activity that actually created the opportunity that made that person go, okay, yeah, I'll have a meeting now. I'm ready. Okay. For events, to be frank, that's the most impactful.
So the meetings typically.
So it's what was the first step before they agreed with the SDR to have a meeting?
Okay.
What was that? Sorry, the last step. So it's the last touch model.
Okay.
But to measure the real impact of field events and like most events, I mean, most of marketing tactics, you do need to have that multi-touch in place, be it the U shape, be it the M shape. There are different models that you can put in place. But yeah, when you measure ROI in a more mature way, it's important to see that, at least on your top accounts, especially if you're going for an account-based marketing, on your top accounts, what were the activities that touched? And one of our key objectives, as I said at the beginning, is really to make sure that we are touching through our events all of these top accounts.
A question we like to ask is if you had to get hired at another company, okay, let's say, and you need to convince the CEO of the scale-up that event marketing, field marketing is a strategy that they should put into place. Technically, what would you say to this high-level executive who clearly wants very business-oriented metrics, right? But what would you tell this person in order to convince him that they should start doing that strategy in-house?
So that's a great question, and you can go the most direct way and say, oh, field events are fantastic because they'll generate this amount of pipeline, and statistically, this is what we see. But I'd expand the conversation, especially if you're a scale-up. You need to be focused, right? So field events allow you to do three things. They allow you to do communication, because when you're at a field event, you're exposing your brand. Second, it allows you to do product marketing too. You're able to see what are the most relevant trends on the market. And that's actually a third one it actually impacts the third one, which is sales. Ability to put your sales in front of prospects, in front of their future customers, for them to have that interpersonal, the one-to-one discussions, understand really what the pain points are, and start a conversation, right? The cycle between somebody downloading a white paper, navigating our website, then having 1 call, 2 calls, 3 calls, I don't know how many, before the SDR is able to actually speak to them is not comparable to having an event, somebody's engaging with you at an event. And there's a stats from Statistica that says that you have a 34% more chances of closing when a lead has been first engaged in an event or has been engaged in an event during the sales cycle, because you're able to create that connection. So not only is it impactful on your bottom line in terms of pipeline creation, but it's also impactful for your branding and your product research to invest in event marketing.
You were talking before about how, we kind of live in this world now where, there's so many tools and we're saturated with emails and phone calls, and most times clients, put a big question mark on if that person that's sending me an email is even a person itself. Mm-hmm. Actually, yesterday we were with the event marketing manager from Content Square, who was mentioning that most times she, goes to these events herself, for which she's inviting all her prospects and clients, and a lot of times their first reaction when they see her is, "Oh my God, you exist." and she actually was saying that to us, which is hilarious, but also so true, because it's true that we, even with all these levels of personalization that we have today with emailing and phoning, there's still that question mark. So can you just kind of elaborate a little bit on this point about how event marketing compares to all these more traditional strategies of growth marketing, whether that be emailing, phoning, and whatnot?
Mm-hmm. It's funny. It's not a unique experience. It's happened to me too. Since I manage PRM, my name is signed on most of the emails that we send out.
Okay.
So it goes back to what we were saying around authenticity. People actually want that human approach. That's why you're seeing impacts of webinars go down versus physical events. You know, after COVID, there was a real conviction that we can do everything virtually. No, we can't. People want to see people. And when you're talking about purchasing software solution for enterprise, which is the case at LumApps, that's a big investment. You need to see people. You need to see that you've got a team that you can trust that's going to be there for customer service after the signature too. That's why having, customers speak on your behalf goes miles. And that's why having a great team on site with experiences that show that we're not just here to sell, but we're here to consult goes miles too. So yeah, the human approach has to be also accompanied, it depends. Some people really like to control the sales cycle. So that's also something we need to consider. And that event marketing is more of a complement to. So like people like to do their own research, and act online, and then once they're convinced, they want a conversation. But again, what can you trust online is a real question people are asking. So having a face-to-face conversation, you're able to gauge a bit better who you're dealing with.
We have an interesting statistics that we like to say and mention, which is the average touch points to kind of close a deal in B2B SaaS is typically 50 on average. An event, if well planned and executed, can actually bring you 10, which is 1/5 of the sales cycle, right? So clearly it does have an impact on reducing the sales cycle. Some companies will say, sometimes as a sales representative, I could do 3 calls into one event technically, right? Is that something that is a conversation at LumApps? Do you guys recognize that? Is that something the sales recognize? Do you measure it? Do you validate what we're saying, basically?
Instinctively, I'd say yes. So, we're still working on attribution models. So there's still a lot of tracking and improving the way we're measuring things at LumApps. But there is a sales recognition that to me is worth as much as the data, because it shows the engagement of our teams. But there is a recognition that yes, the connections that you make in event really do accelerate the sales cycle. And one of the reasons is also people are coming there because they either have already using our solution and are looking for better practices, or because they have a project. So it's also the quality of the opportunities that you're able to create from an event.
A lot of people are like, how the hell can you measure the ROI of an event? Because as we were just saying before, a lot of people just don't have the right metrics, or don't have the right tools, or don't have the right outlook on the way that they're doing events. And so that people, when we tell people, oh, we're developing a tool to help you measure the ROI of an event, they're like, what does that even mean? So it would be good for you to talk about the struggles.
Yeah, struggles is nice as well.
And then also explain and reinsert how much you can kind of measure the ROI of an event.
The reason why we really focus on ROE is because we can also see a sort of trend in event marketing, which is basically less is more in a way. So it's great to do a lot of events, but today, because they're starting to realize we need to measure impact, they're starting to be smarter in terms of the decisions of which events to do and which ones to cut. And so we can see throughout scale-ups that maybe before they were doing lots of events without having this visibility of concretely what is it bringing me. And now top management is starting to say, listen guys, this is costing a lot of money, right? Because like you said, it is costing budget. Now we need results. And without the results, you probably are doing a lot of events that are in a way blind. And you were mentioning startups are doing a lot of trade shows thinking, oh, this is great. We're going to catch so many leads, do so much brand awareness. But there's so many trade shows today that a lot of it is just wasted money, right? So yeah, the topic of the struggles, the topic
Yeah.
of ROI,
Yeah.
this would be two good points to kind of close the discussion with.
Yeah. So I don't want to be pessimistic about event marketing or event marketers. It's a fantastic, position to be in because you're actually, engaging with people on the market. So there's a lot of value to learning and starting your career as a marketer in event marketing. It really gives you the right tools to then do product marketing because you understand your market. There are realities though about the struggles and the weight event marketing has. As an event marketer, you're not just planning an event. You're coordinating teams. You're coordinating logistics. You're doing analysis. So. I mean, it's a massive amount of work just in manpower, and what good CMOs realize too is that you can't just inject $1 more or $100,000 more into your event marketing budget and expect a higher return on investment just by doing more events, unless you're also investing in the number of team members you have organizing those events, or freelancers supporting or externalizing that activity. Because an event well done requires so much work. And we spoke about coordinating the teams. Like literally, we've got 5 calls minimum for each one of our events to prepare it and to make sure that the follow-up is done correctly. Then in terms of our tools to measure, we've got, of course, Salesforce, which today is our Bible in terms of following metrics. But we also have Google Sheets on the side to do one-to-one follow-up with notes, make sure that the SDRs are calling everybody at the frequency that we've defined to make sure that, our nurture emails are functioning correctly, and then that. So that's the reality. If you want an effective event marketing strategy, you need to put the human resources in place, not just budget. Doing a bunch of events may seem good for your branding at the beginning and, your logo can be out there. It's not going to give the results unless you've got actually people working around it.
Thank you, Elise, for joining us today on the podcast, the Loca Talk. And we look forward to having you again on set. I think we've had great discussions about your expertise about event marketing and the specific growth that we're seeing, especially around this topic at the moment. So we're really looking forward to having further chats with you to see where you take us with the rest of the strategies that you have put in place.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having this podcast. I mean, event marketing is not talked about enough. And I really do think that it's going to become a key strategy for companies looking to grow and to make meaningful connections with their prospects in the future. So thanks again.